So we're going to talk about simile and metaphor. So let's first take a look at the simile. When we talk about a simile, it is actually a figure of speech that compares two different things. And the writer's objective is to actually establish this creative connection through the minds of the readers, through the things that are being compared. So if we take a look at this example, when my dad watches basketball, he becomes immovable like a rock. See? So, if we take a look at this, it implies that his dad doesn't get out of his seat when watching basketball games. So that's the literal meaning. Okay, so that's the meaning. But if you can actually take a look at the sentence, it gives you this figurative language wherein his dad is compared or being compared into an immovable rock. And if you notice the comparison, there is actually like a rock or immovable like a rock. So that's how the comparison was actually shown. Now, it's important to take note of that because if we take a look at metaphor, it is also a figure of speech that compares two different things. So it's similar to simile, okay? But it rids of the terms such as like or as a. So it's said to be a much more direct comparison. Okay? So it's basically directly stating that this certain person or what is being compared is that thing or is that certain thing being compared. For example, when my dad watches basketball, he becomes an immovable rock. So if you can see the differences, immovable like a rock, that's your simile because it employs the use of like a or maybe sometimes in the form of as a. But if we take a look at the metaphor, it rids of those like a and as a. It is much more direct and it states that his dad is really a rock, becomes an immovable rock. So again, these two, they have the same meaning of what they're trying to imply. It's just that both have different presentations of it. So you can either present it in a simile, through a simile or through a metaphor. Okay, so those are the first two figures of speech that we have or we are discussing. Now, the next one is your personification. Okay? Basically, personification is a figure of speech that gives non-living things or ideas, okay, human-like qualities and characteristics. So again, we're giving non-living things, ideas included, human-like characteristics. Okay, again, you can only use personification if it is reflected in non-living things. So that's your key. Personification is used in non-living things. If we take a look at this example, the wind raging with anger pushed the cars off the streets with such great force. Okay, so if we analyze the text, okay, it shows that the wind is giving off characteristics similar to a person who is angry. Can the wind really rage with anger? No, the wind is just blowing strong winds because of some scientific explanation, am I right? But here, it is actually personified wherein the strong blowing of winds, no, is related to the anger a person feels or how a person rages with anger. And you know, it personified the wind in that way. So it implies that the wind currents were so strong that it could push the cars off the streets, similar to someone with great rage, right? For example, if you and me are angry, we tend to do things that we do not want to do, and we actually burst out. For some of us, we burst out, and that is what personification is. It actually puts a human-like characteristic into a non-living thing. That's how you use personification. Now, the next would be your pun. Now, puns are I think, are very common because of the rise of memes, right? Um, Basically, it is a figure of speech that is a joke that makes a play on words. So, I know that this is a review for you. You might be familiar with pun. Pun, play on words. Pun, play on words, okay? Now, puns can have multiple meanings, okay? Or words, it can actually make use of words that sound similar but have different meanings to add this humorous effect. You can actually make use of your homophones, homonyms, and homograms, wherein you use that so that you can actually change, or you can actually play with those words. So if we take a look at this example, a pessimist's blood is always B negative. So we all know that being a pessimist always sees the negative or downside of things, okay, or the things that don't really go well. They tend to highlight more on that. So if we analyze the sentence, why is it a pun? Because it made use of a type of blood which is B negative, and then it associated it to the pessimist, which is always negative. So if you actually listen closely, a pessimist's blood is always B negative. It's similar to the BE negative. Um, it's not fun when you try to explain jokes, am I right? But yeah, that's actually how you do the pun. You play on words to sound like the original word, or to be similar sounding to this original word, to actually create a much more fun effect. If you actually watch Pinoy Architect, Sir Lloyd Austria, he loves puns, and sometimes, well, most of the time, puns are actually associated to dad or tito jokes. So again, that's your pun. It is a play on words, and you use the homophones, homonyms, homographs in order to familiarize yourself and to enable yourself to have a much more fun on words, or much more fun when it comes to playing with words. So those are your first four, so that I do not overload your thoughts. So let's try to scaffold it. So the first four is first is the simile, and then you have your metaphor, then you have the personification, and then the pun.